Hi, it's V with Crafting Daily Dose, and today I have another alternative for the December 2021 paper pumpkin called Lots of Fun. This one is a peekaboo card with a little window showing a cute image. When you open the card, the image changes. It's a lot of fun to play with, and it's also a lot of fun to make, plus it's quicker than it looks. In fact, it was so easy and fun that it was hard to stop with just one, so here's another version. And one more. I'll walk you through how I made the first one, and I'll also mention what I used for the other versions. Here's what we're using for the card. For this particular one, I'm using Daffodil Delight cardstock, and I've cut down about 1.5 pieces of cardstock. There are 3 parts to this card. The front of the card is 8 1/4 inches by 4 1/4 inches, and it's been scored at 2 3/4. The back of the card is this small piece. It is 5 3/4 of an inch by 4 1/4 of an inch, and it's been scored at 5 1/2, leaving just this 1/4 inch flap here on the end. The inside piece is 8 1/2 by 4 1/4, and it's been scored down the middle at 4 1/4 inches. I'm using the cherry and the banana die cuts from the kit. If you've already used yours up or are saving them for something else, remember you can also use the stamp set to create these images. Stamp them onto colored cardstock or stamp them onto white cardstock and color them in, and then fussy cut them out with your snips. I'll be stamping onto one of these sentiment labels from the kit, and then I've got a couple of decorative die cuts as well. I'm using the Early Espresso ink color from the kit. And I need something to create the peekaboo windows, and for that I'm using the 5th largest of the plain circle dies from the Layering Circle die set. This one is about 1 7/8 of an inch across. Now that die set also includes these scallop dies, which are really pretty, but I decided that it's a lot harder to line those up, so I'm using the plain circle instead. If you don't have those dies, look around in your stash to see if you have another die that's about the same size or maybe a punch. But if you don't have any of those, don't worry, because I'll also show you the measurements to create a square window using just your trimmer. You can also consider using this die cut from the kit. It fits really well in the window that I'm creating with my die. If you're creating the windows in a different way, then try it out first to see whether you like it. Once we have all our pieces, then we're ready to go ahead and get started. So here's my front piece. It's one of the larger pieces, the one that has the asymmetrical score line, and this section here is the part that you'll see on the front of the card. We want to create a window in this upper right hand corner, and so I'm going to place my die here, and I'm just eyeballing it. I have about maybe a 1/2 inch margin along the side and along the top. I'm using a piece of washi tape to hold it in place. You can also use a sticky note, and I'll go ahead and get this cut out. Here's my front piece with that circle cut out, and now I'm going to lay it on top of my middle piece. This is the other large piece, the one that has a score line down the center, and I'm going to line them up here so that the corners match up. Now I'm going to just trace around that circle with a pencil. I'm going to take my piece and do a mountain fold, folding away from me. So now you've got a little square mini card here. I'll reinforce that fold with my bone folder. And now I'll center my die over the circle that I traced out. I'm going to keep this little mini card folded over like that, so I'm going to be cutting through 2 layers here. Now, as a way to check my placement here, I can bring back that front piece and line them back up. I'll be able to see the edges of the die through the opening in the front and check and make sure that I have a pretty even border of the die all the way around. It doesn't have to be perfect, of course, but this is just a way to check and make sure that I'm not completely off. I have put in a little extra piece of washi there to keep it secure, and I'm checking on the back and it looks like mine cut all the way through. If yours did not, you might want to try running it again. But here's my piece. An extra nice thing about running it through while the piece is folded is that the inside edge, which is what we're going to see, stays nice and smooth. You won't get any of those impressions from your edged plates, at least not on the parts of the card that are going to be visible. Now, if you don't have a die or a punch that you can use, let me show you how to cut a square window with your trimmer. Okay, let's pretend that this is one of the pieces that you need to cut, whether it's the front piece or the inside piece. The width is going to be different between those, but the height is the same. It's 4 1/4 inches. What we're going to do is to place the width across the top of the trimmer track, and we're going to place this at 1/2 inch on the right hand side. I'm going to do a partial cut from 1/2 inch down to 2 1/2 inches. I'm looking at the notch on the side of my cutting blade and looking at the numbers along the track. So cut from 1/2 inch down to 2 1/2 inches. Now we're going to turn the piece counterclockwise. We're going to place it at 1/2 inch along the left-hand side now. And we're again cutting from 1/2 inch down to 2 1/2 inches. Now we're going to move to the 2 1/2 inch position. We'll make that same cut from 1/2 inch down to 2 1/2 inches. Now turn it counterclockwise one more time. You're going to place your paper at 2 1/2 inches. And this time you're going to cut from 1 3/4 inch down to 3 3/4 inch. And there's your window. Now, I wasn't totally accurate right here in this cut, so I can just trim that off with my snips. And I've created a window. If you're using your trimmer, remember that you need to repeat that process 3 times. You need to do it for the front of the card, and then for the inside of the card. It may be hard to cut this doubled, so what I would do is to first cut one corner and then turn it this way. You're actually going to like flip it this way, so now you're looking at the very inside of the card, and repeat that same process for this last corner here. Once we have our window, we are ready for stamping. Now I'm going to take my sentiment and just stamp it repeatedly over here on the left-hand side. I'm going to put down this little decorative die cut just for placement, so I know what kind of space I have available. I'm stamping with Early Espresso ink, and I'm stamping on top of the foam mat for my Stamparatus because I always like to have a little bit of cushion under the paper when I'm using clear photopolymer stamps. Next, I'll stamp that same sentiment onto this label die cut. I'm bringing back the front of the card and I'm going to flip it over like this. I'm going to use the dotted texture stamp to stamp some dots up here in this area. I've just inked up my stamp partially this time, so only these little dots over here have ink on them. After we assemble our card, the inside piece is going to cover up most of this. There's going to be a little 1/4 inch gap in between them on the back. And we're going to be able to see these dots through the window. So I'm double checking and it looks like my space is filled out pretty well here. There are plenty of extra dots, but it doesn't matter because those are not going to show. Now we can go ahead and stamp this inside piece. I'll bring in my silicone mat since I'm stamping off the edge a little bit. I'll be adding a few dots around this window. And now I get to add my sentiment. And finally, it's time to add those cute little faces on. We're ready to assemble. Here's the lonely back piece that we haven't used so far. We're going to go ahead and fold up the score line as a valley fold, so fold it towards you, and then reinforce that. Now you're going to need some adhesive along this flap. You can use your multi-purpose glue for that, but I'm going to be using tear and tape. If you had also gotten last month's kit, you may still have some of that tear and tape left over. I'm going to reinforce this with my bone folder again so that I make sure that I get a good seal. Next, I'm going to bring in my inside piece. This flap is going to attach to the back of this inside piece. So I'm going to go ahead and start to peel off some of the backing. I'll leave myself a little tail here, and I'm going to begin to line them up. I can make any little adjustments as I need to, and then gradually peel off more of the backing. This area is what's going to show through the window when the card is closed. So if I wanted to go ahead and use my cherries, I can go ahead and glue them on at this point. Since I'm going to be using this piece though, what I'm first going to do is to trace around that circle. And I'm going to flip this open. So now I'm looking just at the back of the card. I can see where my circle is. And I'll glue my decorative piece on top of that. Now, if you use something different to create your window, this piece may not fit exactly, so you can decide whether you want to use it or not. I'm covering up completely the circle that I drew and then checking to make sure that the edges are not going to show through my opening. Now, because the edges of my shape are not smooth, here's a tip that I learned from Jennifer McGuire. I'm going to use a piece of clear tape, and I'm just going to tape over some of those edges. It doesn't need to be a lot, just a little bit. What this does is it creates a smooth surface for the parts of the card that move, and you'll see that at the end. Now that part is done, and this is what things look like so far. Now I'm going to put some adhesive on this surface. So again, here's the inside of the card that is visible. Here's the front of that inside piece, and this is going to get covered with glue. I'll put my silicone piece back in just to make sure that I don't end up squishing any glue onto the rest of the card. And then I'm going to lay the front of my card over that, matching up the window and the edges. And I just have a few more pieces to glue on. My camera cut out on me for a little bit there, but you can see all the pieces that have been glued on here. Now what we're going to do is to take this little flap that's hanging off the front, and we are going to tuck it behind underneath this inside piece here, just like this. Now when you open the card, that piece that we had tucked behind comes into view in the window. And as it does so, it glides over the edge of this piece here on the back. So now you can see why that clear tape is useful. Once we have the card open, this is where the banana is going to go. So I'll go ahead and glue it on. This version of the card is made from Pool Party cardstock, and as you can see, I used several of the die cuts from the kit as well as some of the embellishments. Now for this background here, what I did was cut up one of the envelopes using a larger circle die. So you can see one there, and then there's the other one for the egg. This version also uses Pool Party cardstock, the die cuts and embellishments. The background here was cut out from one of the card bases. And then this background here is from one of the envelopes. Otherwise, these other versions are created just the same as the original. So once you know how to do that, there are so many possibilities. So here are the completed cards. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this dose of creativity. If you get a chance to make the projects, I would love to see them, so don't forget to tag me or to post it in my Facebook group. If you're interested in Paper Pumpkin and don't have a demonstrator yet, you can find the subscription link as well as all my other links in the description box below. I hope to see you again next time, and until then, have a great day.